My brother lied to our parents claiming I was useless and lazy, so they disowned me. Now I'm successful and he's begging for my help. I've always been the scapegoat of my family. I'm a 28-year-old guy now, but this pattern started so early I can't even remember a time when it wasn't that way. I was the second-born son. Quieter, more sensitive, more forgettable, I guess. My brother Kyle, on the other hand, was everything they ever wanted. Tall, athletic, all smiles at the dinner table and straight A's without even trying. He could break a window and somehow I'd be the one grounded. Growing up, I'd bring home a drawing and hear, "That's nice," but Kyle just won first place in the spelling bee. I'd get a B+, and it'd be, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" He was their pride. I was the cautionary tale. The worst part was, Kyle knew it. He wore their praise like armor and wielded it like a weapon. He could manipulate them without breaking a sweat. If he didn't want to clean the garage, he'd say I lost his baseball glove. If he came home late, he'd say I distracted him with video games. And they'd believe him every time. I started shrinking into myself by the time I hit 12. I stopped showing them my grades, even when I aced something. I learned it hurt less to expect nothing than to hope for a scrap of praise. The more I pulled away, the more they said I was distant and moody. Kyle would lean in, whisper behind their backs, "You're acting like a freak, you know that?" Sometimes I'd lie awake at night and wonder if maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was just born broken, but deep down there was a flicker. Something didn't add up. Kyle's charm felt too rehearsed, too strategic. And as I got older, I started noticing cracks in his mask. Cracks I never dared expose. Not yet. But I should have known, one day they'd come for me anyway. I used to think childhood was supposed to be messy but fair. In our house, it was just messy. From the time I could tie my shoes, Kyle had a way of planting blame like seeds and watching it grow on me. The broken vase? My fault, even though I was at school. The missing $20 bill from Dad's wallet? "Oh, maybe he spent it on snacks," Kyle would say, eyes wide with innocence, while I stood there stammering, unable to defend myself. By the time I was a teenager, it was second nature. Kyle caused the problem, and I carried the punishment. My parents never questioned him. Not once. They'd look at me with this mixture of disappointment and disgust. "Why can't you be honest for once?" Mom would snap, her voice sharp like glass. Dad would shake his head, muttering, "We didn't raise you to be this way." I'd open my mouth to protest and feel the words die in my throat. Nothing I said ever mattered. Kyle's version of reality was the one that stuck. After a while, the house stopped feeling like home. It felt like a courtroom where the verdict was always guilty, and I was always the defendant. My bedroom became my hiding place. I'd lock the door, sit on the floor, and stare at the posters on my walls until my eyes blurred. I started skipping meals, stopped talking to friends. Even when I did do something right, help with chores, get a good grade, the recognition never came. I began to wonder if they were right. Maybe I was dishonest. Maybe I was lazy, ungrateful, broken. That's how deep the lies went. And the more I shrank, the more Kyle filled the space I left behind. Smiling, charming, perfect. I didn't know it yet, but the worst accusation was still coming. And this time it would cost me everything. Graduation day was supposed to be mine. I wasn't valedictorian or anything, but I'd worked harder than anyone would ever know just to get through high school with decent grades. I remember standing in the mirror that morning, straightening the cheap black gown and thinking, maybe today will feel different. Maybe for once, my parents would look at me with pride instead of disappointment. The ceremony itself was a blur of names and applause. My stomach twisted when I saw my parents waving frantically at Kyle in the stands. He wasn't graduating, he was just there to watch. But later I found out why. He'd just been awarded a prestigious scholarship to a state university, and they couldn't stop talking about it. That night at dinner, Mom raised a toast to Kyle's future. "To our brilliant boy," she beamed. I tried to smile, but then Kyle smirked at me over his glass. "And congrats to you too, little bro," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "You barely made it through high school, huh?" Everyone laughed, even Dad, who slapped Kyle's back like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. I sat there frozen, heat crawling up my neck. "That's not true," I muttered, but no one heard me. Or maybe they didn't care. Later that night, when the house had quieted, I went to grab a glass of water and heard voices from the living room. Kyle was talking to our parents in a low, steady tone. "He's got no ambition," Kyle said. "You'll see. He's going to end up a failure. He's lazy and entitled, and he blames everyone else." I stood in the hallway, my hands trembling so hard the glass nearly slipped. It wasn't just a joke anymore. This was Kyle rewriting my life right in front of them. And the worst part? They believed him. In that moment, something inside me cracked in a way I knew would never heal the same again. After graduation, I enrolled in a local community college. I couldn't afford anything else, but I was proud of it. I was juggling night classes and working part-time at a hardware store, stocking shelves until 2 a.m., coming home with my feet throbbing and hands raw from lifting boxes. It wasn't glamorous, but I was trying. No one ever asked how I was doing. But I was still trying. Kyle had moved out for university by then, but he was always around, always checking in, as my parents called it. What I didn't know was that while I was out working or studying, he was playing puppet master behind the scenes. It started with little things: a letter from the school that never showed up, a financial aid document I never saw. I'd hear my mom mention a voicemail I never got. Kyle had access to our shared family accounts, and I found out later, he used that access to erase me. He told my parents I'd dropped out, that I spent my days in the basement smoking weed and playing video games. He even said I was stealing money from Mom's purse. Then one day, I came home from work, sweaty and exhausted, to find both of them waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed, expressions stone cold. "You have 5 minutes to explain why you've become a worthless leech," Dad growled. I laughed, thinking it was some kind of horrible misunderstanding. "What are you talking about? I just got off work. Enough lies!" Mom snapped, slamming a folder on the table, filled with overdue tuition notices and screenshots Kyle had gathered. None of it was real, but it looked real enough. When I tried to explain, my dad yelled, "Get out! You're not our son anymore." And just like that, I was disowned, exiled from the only home I ever knew, all because of a lie I didn't even see coming. I still remember the way the doorknob felt in my hand. Cold. Final. Like I was turning a page I didn't want to read. I was told to pack and leave. No discussion, no goodbye, no hug. Just, "You've got 30 minutes. My dad's voice had never sounded so empty. I grabbed what I could, a duffel bag with some clothes, my cracked phone, my textbooks. My laptop was gone. Kyle had borrowed it months ago and never returned it. My mom stood at the kitchen sink, her back to me. She didn't turn around once. I paused on my way out, hoping for something. Anything. But my dad just pointed to the door. "We're done with you," he said. Then I saw him. Kyle. Leaning in the hallway with his arms crossed, smirking like he'd just won a game only he was playing. I stared at him for a second, hoping guilt would flicker across his face. It didn't. I walked out without saying a word. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a safety net. Just a phone with 7% battery and a sinking feeling in my chest I couldn't shake. I called my coworker Jonah, the only person I could think of. He didn't ask questions. Just gave me his address and told me I could crash on his couch for a while. That first night, lying on that stiff sofa with springs digging into my back, I stared at the ceiling for hours. I couldn't cry. I couldn't sleep. It felt like someone had died, except they were still alive and they had chosen to kill me off instead. It hit me then. Maybe they never loved me. Not really. Maybe I was just filling a role they needed me to play, the failure, the shame, the disappointment, and now that I was gone, they probably slept just fine. Living on Jonah's couch was humbling in every way imaginable. His apartment smelled like instant noodles and gym socks. The cushions were flat from years of use, and I had to duck under a busted ceiling fan that made this awful clicking sound all night. But it was shelter. It was safe. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking on eggshells. Still, surviving felt like trying to run underwater. I picked up shifts wherever I could. Gas station at night, dishwashing on weekends, even handed out flyers during the day for a sketchy tax service. Some days I was too tired to eat. Other days I skipped meals to save cash for bus fare, but I refused to give up. I'd been called lazy my whole life, and now I was working 70-hour weeks just to afford dollar store shampoo. I needed more. I needed to become more. So after one long night shift, I sat down at Jonah's kitchen table with his cracked old laptop and typed, "How to learn coding for free." That search changed everything. I found online forums, YouTube tutorials, open source communities, whole worlds I didn't know existed. I started small: HTML, CSS, basic Python. I failed a lot. But every time I debugged a problem or figured out a simple function, it lit this tiny spark inside me. Eventually, I landed my first gig on a freelancing site, $50 to build a basic landing page. It felt like $1 million. One gig led to another. Clients started recommending me. The work wasn't fancy, but it was mine. And it was honest. For the first time, I started feeling worthy. Not because someone told me I was, but because I knew I was showing up day after day when it would have been easier to give up. And slowly, quietly, I started becoming someone no one in my family ever believed I could be. By the time I turned 24, I had my own apartment, a modest bank account, and a roster of recurring clients. What started as late-night coding tutorials had evolved into a full-blown freelance business. I built websites, automated small business systems, even consulted on a few startup apps. Eventually, I filed for an LLC, just me, a second-hand desk, and a dream that no one else had ever believed in. I didn't need much. Just stability, peace, and silence, the kind that doesn't come with slammed doors or passive-aggressive comments at dinner. Then, out of nowhere, I started hearing Kyle's name again. Not from family, and they still pretended I didn't exist, but from mutuals, old classmates, and random LinkedIn suggestions. Apparently, the golden boy had lost his shine. He'd flunked out of university 2 years in, caught cheating on multiple exams, then tried to cover it up. The school made it quiet, but the rumors didn't die. Word was he'd moved back in with mom and dad, working on a startup that never launched. I won't lie, there was a part of me that felt vindicated. But I didn't gloat. I didn't reach out. I didn't post anything online, I just observed. It was strange hearing the cracks in his perfect armor. The same guy who once smirked at me from the hallway was now stumbling through adulthood with a resume padded by lies. Still, I kept my head down. I wasn't healed yet. Not fully. The scars were still fresh. Years of being called useless don't fade overnight. But something had shifted. I no longer craved their approval. I no longer needed Kyle to fall for me to rise. I was climbing on my own. And deep down, I had this feeling. The story wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. It happened so unexpectedly, I thought it was a scam at first. An email landed in my inbox from a mid-sized startup looking to scale fast. They needed back-end automation and site optimization. I pitched them with everything I had: portfolio, testimonials, pricing tiers. I didn't think I stood a chance. But 2 days later, they signed a 6-month contract with my firm. And just like that, my income tripled overnight. I stared at the signed PDF for almost 5 minutes before I even realized I was crying. That deal changed everything. I moved out of my shoebox apartment and into a 1-bedroom with real sunlight and walls that didn't leak sound from the neighbors. I bought an ergonomic chair, not because I needed it, but because I could. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. After that first successful quarter, I took a vacation, just a long weekend. Rented a cabin in the mountains. No laptop, no client calls, just quiet. Snow crunching under my boots. The warmth of a fireplace. I hadn't felt stillness like that in years. I went into town for dinner one night and saw a family sitting together, laughing, passing food, nudging each other playfully. And it hit me so hard I had to excuse myself to the bathroom and sit there, hands shaking. I didn't envy them. Not really. But I mourned the fact that I'd never had that. Never would. But then I remembered Jonah, who gave me his couch without question. My first client, who trusted me with a project when I had no formal degree. The communities that helped me code at 3 a.m. when I wanted to quit. Maybe family isn't blood. Maybe it's who shows up when you have nothing to offer but your broken self. And for the first time, I started believing that maybe I wasn't broken after all. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I had just finished a client pitch and was settling in with coffee when my phone buzzed with a notification. Kyle Messenger. Hey, can we talk? I stared at it for so long the screen dimmed. My chest tightened. It had been years of silence, of erasure, of pretending I never existed. And now, he wanted to talk? I didn't respond right away. My fingers hovered, unsure whether to delete it or dive in. Curiosity won. I opened the message. He started light. Hey man, been a long time. Just checking in. Hope you're good. Hope I'm good. He was the reason I had to build my life from the ashes. Still, I played it cool. Yeah, been a while. Then came the pivot. Listen, he said. I didn't want to just dump this on you, but things have been rough. I've had a few setbacks with my business. Nothing major, just temporary stuff. Parents are kind of struggling too. We had to refinance the house to keep things going. I sat in silence, rereading the words. Refinance the house hit like a gut punch. That house wasn't just a building. It was the stage where they crowned him Golden Boy and cast me as the villain. And now it was crumbling under the weight of his failures. I wouldn't ask, Kyle continued, but I know you're doing well now. Maybe you could float us something? A short-term loan? There it was. Not, I'm sorry, not I lied, just help me. I stared at the screen, my coffee gone cold, my heart suddenly pounding like I was 17 again, back in that kitchen being called a disgrace. He hadn't changed. Not really. And whether I realized it or not, this was the beginning of a storm I didn't ask for, but one I was finally ready to weather. I didn't respond to Kyle's message right away. A few days passed. Then, against my better judgment, I agreed to a call, not to help, but because I needed to see him. Hear him squirm. Maybe I just wanted to know if he could look me in the eye and lie again after everything. We connected over video. He looked rough, bags under his eyes, hair unkempt, voice thinner than I remembered. Still, the charm was there. The practiced smile. The hey bro, good to see you. I let him talk. He went on about the business he started, how investors pulled out, how the market was crazy right now. Then he pivoted again. You remember that email you sent Mom and Dad? He said casually. The one where you tried explaining everything? The night classes, your job, all that stuff? My stomach dropped. What email? I asked, trying to sound neutral. You know, back when they kicked you out. You wrote this whole thing defending yourself. It was like 3 pages long. Super emotional. He kept talking, but I wasn't listening anymore. They got it. They read it. I had poured my heart into that message. Explained everything, the job, the night school, the lies. I begged them to talk to me. I never heard back. Not a single word. I assumed it went to spam. Got lost, but they read it. They knew. They knew the truth and still chose Kyle's version. They threw me out anyway. I wasn't just collateral damage in Kyle's manipulation. I was abandoned, knowingly, willingly, by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The silence that followed wasn't ignorance. It was a decision, and that realization cut deeper than anything Kyle had ever said. The second call came less than a week later. This time, Kyle didn't bother with the fake warmth or awkward small talk. He sounded panicked, haggard. The desperation was thick in his voice like smoke. Look, man, he said, I wouldn't be calling again if it wasn't serious. Things are falling apart. Mom and Dad, they're selling stuff. Furniture, heirlooms, even Dad's car. We're drowning here.
We? That word echoed in my head like a joke. I didn't say much.
Just listened, letting the silence drag long enough for him to fill it with more begging. I'm just asking for a little help. A short-term loan. You're doing well now, right? You've got your own company. You've got it easy. I almost laughed. Easy. He said I had it easy. The years of minimum wage jobs, sleeping on couches, skipping meals, teaching myself to code from scratch, getting rejected again and again, all dismissed like it was handed to me on a silver platter. All because now on the surface I looked successful. You always had it easier than me, he muttered, like he was the victim in all this. That's when it really hit me. Kyle had never lived in reality. He'd been coddled his whole life, protected from consequences by our parents, shielded by excuses and lies. And now that the cushion was gone, now that their house of cards was collapsing, he had nothing. No savings. No real friends. No investors willing to take another chance. I asked him, what about your business partners? They ghosted me. Your college buddies? They stopped answering my texts. He had burned every bridge. And now he was standing at mine with a torch in one hand and a sob story in the other. But this time, there was no one left to catch him when he fell. I don't know why I agreed to meet them. Maybe I needed to see it for myself, the wreckage. Maybe I wanted answers. Or maybe I just wanted to feel nothing when I walked into that house again. The day I drove up to my childhood home, the place looked smaller than I remembered. Not just physically or emotionally. The warmth I used to beg for as a kid had vanished. The curtains were drawn. The yard was overgrown. Even the paint looked tired. My mom opened the door. She looked older. Not gracefully, more like time had worn her down in places she couldn't cover with makeup. Her smile was tight, unsure. My dad stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes darting away like I was a stranger at the door. Maybe I was. Kyle sat in the living room, hunched forward, elbows on knees. He looked like a man unraveling, like not just broke, but broken. "Thanks for coming," he said, voice hoarse. "We just wanted to talk, face to face." They didn't waste time. After a few awkward pleasantries, Kyle slid a stack of papers across the table. "We need you to co-sign a loan," he said. I didn't even look at it. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the letter, the one I'd emailed them years ago after they kicked me out. I had printed it, folded and yellowed with time. Slowly, I unfolded it. "I want to read you something," I said calmly. They looked confused at first, then quiet. As I read every word aloud, my pain, my truth, my plea for them to listen, no one interrupted. No one moved. By the end, the room was so still I could hear the old wall clock ticking. I folded the letter, placed it gently on the table, and looked up. For the first time, they had nothing to say. My mom was the first to speak, or try to. Her lip trembled as tears welled up in her eyes. "I didn't know. I didn't realize," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We thought you were lying." Kyle said. I held up a hand, gently but firmly. I know what Kyle said. That's not the part that hurts. She started sobbing quietly into her hands. My dad shifted in his chair, clearing his throat like he was trying to dislodge the guilt stuck there. "We were trying to push you," he said. "We thought if we were hard on you, it would make you stronger. We didn't think you needed hand-holding." I looked at him, this man I'd spent my childhood trying to impress. And all I felt was nothing, no rage, no need to yell, just a hollow ache where love used to live. Kyle leaned forward, his voice cracking. "I messed up, okay? I was stupid and selfish. But I was a kid too. I didn't know it would get this bad. Can we just start over?" Start over? Like the years of silence, betrayal, and manipulation could be scrubbed away with a handshake? I stood slowly. The letter lay on the table between us, the weight of it heavier than anything I could say. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I don't have anything left to give you." They didn't stop me when I walked toward the door. No one begged, no one chased. Just the quiet collapse of a family built on favoritism and denial. There was no dramatic slam of the door. New final insult. Just the soft click of it closing behind me, and in that silence, I finally heard myself breathing again. Not victorious. Not angry, just free. Back in my own apartment, the silence felt different. It wasn't heavy anymore. It didn't remind me of being ignored or forgotten. It was the kind of silence that wraps around you like a warm blanket, earned, not imposed. I got back to work, poured myself into my projects. But something inside me had shifted. I couldn't stop thinking about the younger version of myself. The kid who sat alone in his room, wondering if he'd ever be good enough, if he'd ever matter to anyone. So I decided to do something for him. I started volunteering at a local community center that offered coding classes for teens. Most of the kids came from fractured homes, some living in group shelters, others dealing with neglect or poverty. I recognized the look in their eyes, that quiet doubt, the hesitance to speak up, the instinct to shrink. I started mentoring a few of them one-on-one. I didn't just teach them how to code. I listened to them. I told them what no one ever told me: you're not broken. You're not a burden. You're worth something. That grew into something bigger. I launched a small scholarship fund, nothing massive at first, just enough to cover laptops or certification fees. I named it after my younger self. Not for vanity, but for closure. For healing. Meanwhile, my company kept growing. I hired my first full-time employee, then a second. Clients referred me to others. I got invited to speak on panels and webinars. The same world that once felt 1,000 miles away now felt like home. But the best part wasn't the money or success. It was looking in the mirror and finally seeing someone I needed so badly when I was 17. I never got the love I deserved from my own family. But now, I give it to kids who need it just like I once did. It had been months since I walked out of that house and left the past behind. Life had returned to its rhythm. Morning meetings, mentoring sessions, coding deep into the night with lo-fi beats humming softly in the background. The peace I had built for myself no longer felt fragile. It felt earned. Then, one evening, as I was wrapping up an email, my phone buzzed. Kyle, you were right. I ruined everything. No follow-up. No, can you help me? No excuses. Just 8 words, stark, unfiltered, almost like a confession. I stared at the screen, waiting for the usual second wave, the guilt trip, the spin, the ask. But nothing came. Just those 8 words and the blinking message read icon. For a moment, I felt something stir. Not anger, not sadness. Just a memory of a time when I would have given anything to hear him say those words. When I would have begged for this, an apology, an admission, even a single shred of accountability. But that version of me? He was gone. That boy who needed to be seen, who needed someone to finally say, "You were never the problem." He had already found his own voice. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. Then I deleted the message, not out of spite, not out of pettiness, but because I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need him to validate who I had become. I wasn't chasing closure from someone who once took everything from me. Because the truth was, I had already closed that door myself, and in its place, I'd built something better. A life. A purpose, freedom. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. They used to call me lazy, useless, a failure. Those words lived in my skin for years, buried so deep I thought I'd never scrape them out. They weren't just insults, they were labels. Worn like a weight I was forced to carry into every classroom, every job, every relationship. But now, looking at the life I've built, I finally see the truth. All they did was light a fire, getting kicked out of that house, being erased from my own family. It shattered me. But it also stripped away the need to perform for people who never saw me in the first place. It forced me to ask, who am I when no one is watching? And the answer is, I'm enough, not because I proved them wrong, but because I stopped trying to prove anything to anyone. I started chasing growth instead of approval. I learned to rest without guilt, to speak without apology, to build without begging someone else to let me. I still have scars. I still have days where a memory sneaks in and leaves a lump in my throat. But I no longer run from those moments. I honor them, because they remind me just how far I've come. Kyle lost everything because he thought the world would always bend for him. I gained everything because I finally stopped bending myself to fit into a world that never loved me back. I've built a life I'm proud of. Not polished. Not perfect, but real. And for the first time, that's more than enough. They called me a failure. But failure was the very thing that set me free. And I realize now, sometimes being thrown away is the beginning of being found.